to actually save as much as you could.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And that was a little short moment, but I'm hoping that you were able to share some of your experience. But for any of you that that were in your group and feels comfortable, maybe if you can share some of the commonalities that you all talked about, or just your own experience with any of these questions. And you can put on your chat on the chat too. Okay, someone on the chat put one of weakness when it comes to money is saying no to my kids. When I take them to Target, they always want toys. I definitely understand that.
Yes, even saying no to myself when I go to Target, it's like, do I really need this? Right? So that's good that you already know what your weaknesses are when it comes to money management. Anybody else would like to share out what they discussed in their group? I know you all didn't have a lot of time, but hopefully, is there anything that resonated with you or anything that you found, oh yeah, I can relate to that?
On the chat, there were some comments. I'm spending a lot online while the pandemic was in full effect. Yes, definitely agree with that one. And spending too much on food, which is very common, especially now that we're getting busier and busier, buying things that are not necessary. And one of the reasons why we wanted to put you on breakout rooms and have this brief discussion is because we want to make sure that you realize that it's okay to talk about money, and it's okay to talk about your relationship with money, because a lot of times with being first gen, we're not really exposed to those conversations. We might not be exposed to those conversations at home, or sometimes our parents or our guardians, whoever it might be, might keep that away from us, those type of topics away from us. But it's really important to get comfortable and talk about money management and just educating ourselves on finances. Okay. So when it comes to a budget, everybody talks about it, but we don't really know necessarily what it might mean. So with a budget is a written plan to track your income and expenses. And it's important just to have a better game plan and help you make better decisions when it comes to finances and help you reach your goals. So how to get started, we have 3 tips that we're going to share, but in addition to that, for why it's important, it helps you distinguish, budgeting helps you distinguish your wants versus your needs, and just help you be control of your situation and avoid any debt.
And like Mireya mentioned, we're going to be sharing 3 different tips like we saw in the poll, right? It could be intimidating talking about money, right? We all have a different relationship with it, but oftentimes we see that the majority of us fall under the same category, right? That we once tried something, but it didn't work. So like Mireya and I want to share different tips, but we also want to hear from you all, like what has worked, what hasn't worked, so that at least at the end of today's session, you're able to walk away with one thing that you feel like you want to implement after today's session to make that more of an actionable goal. So the next video we're going to share is going to be budgeting basics, right? Because we all talk about it, but there are so many different ways to go about it. So this video, it's a money thing. Budgeting basics is going to go over a fun way through the credit union of what they consider budgeting.
Fortune teller. Ah, sweet. I can't pass up a good deal.
Come in, come in. Cross my palm with silver to unlock the secrets of eternal prosperity. It's $20, kid.
What? I mean, of course, I thought this was supposed to be a cheaper place.
I sense your name is
Jen?
Jen.
Wow.
And you appear to be a plumber.
Nope.
But there is more than meets the eye. For you have some sort of part-time job?
Yes.
Great. So you have a regular paycheck coming in. Draw a card, Jen. Choose wisely.
Oh no. What does it mean?
Oh, that's just car insurance. That's usually an annual one. So that goes over here. Draw another. Oh my. With that card, I sense a powerful energy here.
The utilities card? Wait a second. Utilities, income, expenses. Are you budgeting me?
Well, yeah.
I thought you read fortunes.
You won't have any fortune left for me to read unless you know how much you spend versus how much you earn. Your income is actually less than your paycheck or salary. When planning a budget, you must factor in taxes and deductions. Otherwise, you will be budgeting money you don't even have.
But budgeting is mostly for saving up for big stuff, right? I pay my rent and internet, and I still have money left over, so I'm good.
How do you know what you can and can't afford?
Well, I look at my account balance, and if there's money there, I know I can spend it.
Your palm! Show me your palm!
Palm reading. Now we're talking. Ow!
No more spending until you give every dollar a job. Part of that account balance that you're freely spending on fun stuff should actually be going to savings and one-time payments. Budgeting doesn't mean feeling guilty for fun purchases. It means feeling confident about them.
Like being in control of your own destiny.
Sure. Look, my crystal ball.
What do you see?
It's a warning, an unforeseen circumstance, an emergency of some sort.
Oh no!
It is unavoidable, Jen. If you do not prepare yourself, it will cost you dearly.
That sounds horrible. What is it? An accident?
It could be, or just like your car doesn't start one morning, or there's a loss of income in your household, or something like that.
Oh, this is a budgeting thing again.
An emergency fund is an important part of your budget.
It's cool. I get it.
Are you sure? Because I predict many more sessions for you with the budget fortune teller at a very reasonable rate.
No, I think I got it. Budgeting is about control. I need to be real about my income and watch out for sneaky expenses. And savings and emergency funds are important. Great.
But the crystal ball told me. I foresee at least 7 to 8 more sessions. Luna has bills to pay too. Hey!
So hopefully you all enjoyed that quick Schools First Federal Credit Union Money Matters video. I always enjoy watching them because I feel like they're silly, they're easy to understand. So the biggest thing we want you all to walk away that is budgeting, it's about creating a game plan, right? And like the quote says at the bottom, remember that if we don't know where our money's going, we lose opportunity to spend it on things that matter the most to us, right? And depending on our life or where we're at, we're going to have different areas where our priorities are going to change, right? So the biggest thing we want you to walk away with when we hear the word budget, it gets thrown out a lot, right? But what that means is income minus expenses. So we want all of you to take out a piece of paper and answer the following, or just keep these questions in mind when starting to create a budget, because again, it's going back to the basics. So the first question you should be asking yourself is, what is your net income? Like we saw in the video. And I know when I first started working in college and got my first paycheck, I was like, yes, I'm going to get a $500 paycheck. But no, little did I know, like the taxes and all the things that were going to be taken out of my paycheck. So I was already spending it before I even had it in my pocket, right? Or in my bank. So again, when looking at what is your income, always only consider your net income. So that is the money you get to take home after taxes. In the past, we have had students ask us, like, what if my income changes from month to month, depending on the hours I work, right? So what we recommend in a situation like that is to get an average, right? What have you been making in the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, so that you could get an average of how much to expect? Because again, it could vary month by month. The next question is, what are your fixed expenses? So these are expenses that are the same month after month. So can somebody in the chat or even unmute themselves share what could be a fixed expense for you? Again, this is something that stays the same month after month.
Rent?
Rent. Okay, thank you, Emma. Yes, definitely a fixed expense could be something as rent, utilities, right? Your car payment. And then the next question is, what are your variable expenses? So these are expenses that shift from month to month. So what could be a variable expense for some of you?
Grocery shopping.
Grocery shopping, the
Like-
light bill, yes. Depending on how much you're spending, right? Especially during the summer months, it's already super hot. And I'm like, it's March. Oh my gosh, what is it gonna be like this summer, right? So yes, when it comes to variable expenses, think about it as like groceries, gas, right? Gas prices are increasing, so that it could be something that might be changing over time as that changes based on the economy, right? So when looking at this, create a chart, right? Use Excel, but there are so many different resources out there as well. But think about when creating these, also think about apps that are out there. I like doing it old school, pulling out a piece of paper, doing on Excel, right? Because then I get to control and assign every single dollar that I get a job, right? Because how many of you have looked at your bank statements within the last week? Give me a thumbs up if you have looked at your bank statement within the last week or your online banking app. Awesome, great. But on average, most people don't, right? And that is one way to know where your money's coming and where it's going. A perfect example is that I know when I was younger, I wouldn't look at my bank statements because of my online banking app, but now I do because after I had a situation where I was getting like fraud, like somebody was taking out money, like testing out with a few dollars. And it wasn't something I was noticing, but eventually it was like $2 and then $5 and then $100. I was like, okay, wait, something's going on, right? So that's why it's so important in order to budget, it's to assign every single dollar a job, but also to look at your bank statements so that you know what your fixed expenses are and your variable expenses.
So with tip number one, this is just really important to just initially reflect on before starting your budget is just knowing your money personality. So a big part of making sure we stick to our budget is knowing our money habits. So I encourage you to reflect and think about these questions that we have on the slide. So when it comes to money, do you notice any common behaviors or patterns that you have with money? Why has it always been like this, or is it evolved or shifted over time? A lot of times if we think about it, and Christina and I have had these conversations in the past where we look a lot to our upbringing and, you know, our family and how money was handled in those situations, and how it's affected us, how it's affected our habits and things like that. So again, I encourage you to think of your money personality kind of like your love language. So making sure that you kind of reflect and think about, okay, what are the habits that I have? What are the patterns that you see? And maybe seeing like how your upbringing affected those things, because it's really important to have that healthy relationship with money. And if it's something that is not there, you know, trying to make the effective think of effective ways to change it. On the chat, there is a lot of money personality quizzes online. This is just one example of one I put on the chat from NerdWallet, but it's just something also to help you think about in regards to your money personality. But as we mentioned before, think about these questions, you know, reflect on this when you have a chance, or even during this presentation. What are your habits, and also what type of money personality do you have?
Yeah, and as college students, it's often easy. I remember just talking to students and they're like, well, so-and-so, like they have the latest and greatest, or always wanting to get an updated phone or the online apps to like all the subscriptions and things like that, right? But we all, like Maria mentioned, have a different relationship with money. And it's okay to take a step back and realize like, what are your priorities? Because your priorities might be different than the person sitting next to you, right? And really coming to terms over that, because as a student parent, you might be looking at different things or different factors because your income and expenses overall, your budget is going to be different than somebody who doesn't have kids or doesn't have to take care of or contribute to the household, right? So taking these money personalities will give you more of an insight of like, yes, that's me. I could totally relate to that. Or wow, like I didn't realize I was doing that. Some of you in the chat mentioned that when you're looking at what categories you're spending your money, you realize like food is a big ticket item, right? That's one of the things that a lot of our students don't notice or realize how much they're really actually spending until they take a step back and assess what their money personality is like. So like I mentioned, we want for tip number 2, for all of you, now that you've taken a step back, okay, I know what a budget is. I know what my money personality might be, right? Well, maybe what I want to change, or maybe having those conversations. Maybe you're in a relationship or you're in a partnership, and that again is going to influence your relationship with money, right? But we want you all to take it a step further and analyze and develop budget categories. Some examples of budget categories are housing, right? And when we think of housing, we have to think of anything that comes with housing, not only rent, but utilities, right? Are these fixed or variable expenses? The other one, when it comes to transportation, a lot of students like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a car. But then you have to think about registration, about gas, insurance, right? So thinking about all those different factors that are within that particular category. And for many of you who have maybe the mainstream bank accounts, a lot of these have online banking systems that are really cool, and they actually do pie charts for you, and they create percentages of how much you're spending in each category. Or you could set out like, I maybe want to have a goal that's not reaching that percentage. So how do I create change? For all of you, as well as education, you get financial aid if you do get a refund, right? 10 days prior to the class's beginning. But you have to make that stretch sometime for 16 weeks. I remember when we went from a quarter system to a semester system, a lot of students are like, yes, I'm getting a bigger paycheck. But it's like, no, now you have to balance it out for 16 weeks instead of the 10, 11 weeks that you would have in a quarter system, right? So really knowing what are all the different factors that you have, and where is the pie chart? Where is your little pie chart the biggest in? And is it aligned with your values? Does it align with your goals, right? And ultimately, the other category many of us don't think about until we start changing priorities or until we start getting older is the savings piece. So there's this one law called Murphy's Law, that the less we prepare for it, the more likely it's going to happen to us, because we're attracting that kind of energy, right? So making sure, like the video mentioned at the beginning, having also a game plan for emergency funds, because car breakdowns, needing new tires, repairs, or anything like that, it could happen, right? So are you prepared to cover an expense that could be small or large? So again, we would recommend for all of you to look at your bank statements and notice patterns. What does it look like in the last 3 months, in the last 6 months, a year? What categories are you spending the most on? And really asking yourself, are these wants or are these needs? So one of the things that I like doing when looking at my budget categories is looking at my wants versus needs. At the end of this presentation, we'll also be sending you all different resources, but these are some examples of different categories that you could think about when looking at your personal aspect too. That's another area that a lot of people don't categorize, but that could be personal care, beauty, clothing, fitness, if you have a membership, right? Medical bills, whatever that may look like, or debt too, right? Whether it be paying off loans or paying off credit card payments. And then also looking at holidays, right? Oftentimes, that could be a big chunk that in the months of November, December, at the end of the year, it's like we're expending a lot more money than we usually would maybe at the beginning, depending on your situation and what that looks like for you. So one of the tips we want to share with you all is the 50-30-20 budgeting rule. So the rule of thumb with this is that many different money, wellness, financial literacy workshops focus on is that you should be spending your money. So if you have $100, right, 50% of it should be going towards your needs, such as groceries, housing, utilities, health insurance, car payments. So covering your basic needs. And then 30% of that should be going towards shopping, dining out, hobbies. We work so hard to get that paycheck, right? So it's also important to have a little bit of balance in what that looks like. But the last 20% should also be going towards savings. And then the next tip we're going to talk about is financial goals. But we really want you to take a step back and realize, is this a need or is this a want? And do you know the difference? Like for me, oftentimes I'm a bargain shopper. I like going and looking for the sales, but sometimes I'm like, okay, they always get me when it's like clearance or 2 for $20 versus 1 for $11.99 or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get 2 for $20. That's a great deal. But then I take a step back, I go around the store. I'm like, okay, is that something I really want? Or is it something I need just because it's on sale, right? So really noticing what that looks like for you so that you could take a step back and really analyze and realize, yeah, I could do away with this, purchasing this item, or no, yeah, like it's a basic necessity that I need to move forward with. A common one we see with their students is on Starbucks. And we have Starbucks like in every single corner or on campus, right? They call it the $5. And I think prices are starting to increase as well, just with a lot of different things, right? So we do a little breakdown, and this is more what coffee, just regular coffee. This is not considering the premium stuff or the frappuccinos or any of the added different flavoring that we may get in our coffees. But if we buy coffee in 1 week, that's $11.25. We could justify that. Okay, that's fine. But then it starts adding up in 1 month, in 6 months, in 1 year, right? So really taking a step back of looking at the bigger picture can really help us, like, okay, how many hours of my job or how many hours of that I work or income that I bring in would it take me to buy something like this? And one of my favorite quotes is through Will Smith. He talks about too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like, right? And especially with social media, with a lot of different apps out there, it's easy to see and want the latest and greatest, right? But there's another quote by Dave Ramsey, who's a financial expert. He talks about live like no one else. So in the future, you live like no one else. Because right now, at a young age, a lot of people may not be saving, but then the more you save right now or able to manage your finances a little bit better, then in the future, you're going to be living like no one else because you prepared for that. So I'm going to pass it over to Mireya so she could talk about some financial goals and how to get to that next step.
I love that quote, that Dave Ramsey quote. That's awesome. So when it comes to tip 3, again, you want to set financial goals, whether that be short-term or long-term goals. You want to think about what are your financial goals, and you can think about maybe just towards the end, towards making a goal towards the end of the semester, right? We have about 7 more weeks of this semester, so that could be something that maybe setting a goal, one financial goal. But in tying into that, you want to think about what are going to be your steps to get there. Okay, so setting something is one part, but actually thinking about realistic ways to get to that goal. Okay, so you want to remember, so if you're consistently spending above your income, then this should be a wake-up call that you're pushing yourself further and further away from your goals. You know, a lot of times we say something and then we forget about it, and then it just keeps on happening, and it just keeps pushing us further and further away from our financial goals. And the biggest thing that we want to emphasize is you should be controlling this, right? There's a lot of things in life that we can't control, but when it comes to finances, we can have majority of the control of over that. Don't let it control you. So when thinking about setting goals, think about also too ways that you could plan ahead. So every month looks different, right? So some months you might spend more than others, depending on if there's, different events going on. So make sure you consider when you're planning a goal, even if it's for the rest of the semester, make sure to not forget about, holidays, anniversaries, whatever it might be, so that you can also take those to account in case you have a more expensive month in that sense. But definitely setting those goals can help you begin taking control of your money.
Yeah, and definitely think about like who in your network influences your money making decisions, right? And having those conversations so that you could set goals together. For example, at the beginning of each year, my partner and I would sit down together and talk about what are 3 month, what are 6 month, what are 9 month financial goals? Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Because if we're not, okay, that's going to be an issue, right? And the number one reason why people separate or have, arguments in a lot of relationships, research shows it's because of finances, right? You might be in chapter 1 and they might be in chapter, 10, right? Or it might be vice versa. For me, like I mentioned, I'm a saver, I'm a bargain shopper. But then my partner was more of like an impulse buyer, right? So knowing our money personality could then inform us what financial goals do we have for the future. When we had our daughter, that changed too, right? Now we had to account and put other expenses that were, needs more so than we wanted to, right? So definitely looking at what is your game plan, having those important conversations. And like Mireya mentioned at the beginning, these are often taboo, right? We don't talk about money and what a relationship is with money, but money's all around us.
That's a great addition, Christina. Yes, definitely talk to your family, talk to your partners about this. It's really important.
So the next thing we want to talk and hear from you all, budget myths. Like Mireya mentioned, we have a lot of great conversations. We're the other day, we were joking, like we should have a money platicas or money talks, right? Because when we get into it, it's like, wow, like I am the way I am because of all the external factors, internal factors that really have shaped into who I am and my relationship with money is. But we also want to hear, what are myths that you all have heard of that maybe you just want to share out, so we could kind of have a discussion on that. So if you feel free to unmute yourself or put some in the chat, like what have you heard when it comes to budgeting? One that we hear oftentimes is, if I start budgeting, then I'm not going to have fun with my money, right? But what are other budgeting myths that you all have heard of or aware of?
I don't think it's, oh, sorry, I'm Natalie.
Hi,
Can
Natalie.
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have a myth. I don't think it's a myth, but like for instance, among my family, we're Mexican, and to endeudarse, like to go, into debt, it's like really bad. But like as students, when you want to buy your own car or your first, brand new car, or to build credit, like that's something you sort of have to do. So I don't know if that has to do something with like budgeting. But yes.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have your familial support system and what that looks like influencing when you look at your money management, correct?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Yeah. Anybody else would like to share their experience when it comes to budgeting and in their relationship with money, or maybe myths that they have heard? Some of you are saying, I don't know if I grew up with any budget myths. Yeah, they're usually one of the common ones is, oh yeah, I can't budget because it's not fun, or it's too hard to do. This isn't for me, or I don't make enough money to begin budgeting, right? But regardless if you're making $100, $1,000, whatever in between, again, budgeting just means assigning every dollar a job.
And I think too, with that, it's just practice, even if you again, as Christina mentioned, like the myth, I used to do that too. I'm like, I'm not making enough to create a budget. If you start just with those even with that small budget, creating those habits, those good habits now, it's going to help you later on when you have your first professional job, and you get your first, or when you get your first big check, you already have these really good habits in spending and in budgeting. So that's definitely something to keep in mind with that myth. Don't disregard just if you feel like you don't make a lot, you could still manage that effectively.
So in the chat, we want all of you to throw out different percentages. So blank percentage of Americans don't have enough saved to cover a $500 emergency. So that's a rule of thumb. Remember when we looked at the 50, 30, 20? Another rule of thumb that a lot of financial experts recommend is that for people to have at least $500 covered in emergency funding, so that in case that happens, that you're able to cover that expense. But what percentage do you all think of Americans don't have even enough money, which is $500, to cover an emergency? So I want to see some numbers thrown in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. 75, okay. It's less than that.
65?
65, okay, close. Yes, so the percentage of Americans that don't have enough money saved to cover a $500 emergency is 63%, right? In another recent study, especially after the pandemic has happened, research shows that over 51% of Americans are starting to feel a lot more anxious when it comes to money management, right? So we hope that through today's session, you're able to keep in mind the 3 different tips that we shared out, because even when we did the poll, we're all at different stages, but making sure that we keep track of that. We want to close out with what do you do to save money? What has worked for you? So I'm going to pass it over to Mireya to lead us in that closing discussion.
Okay. So with that, yeah. So if any of you can put on the chat, like what in your experience, what do you do to save money and what has helped you? So share what's your positive relationship or your positive tools that you've used. Again, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. So we have a couple people share.
Using coupons,
Yeah, using coupons. That's great.
discount codes.
Yes, those are awesome. Asking myself if it's a need or a want. Perfect. Yes. So many times I'm in the store and I go and fill up my cart and then I'm like, I stop before I go and I start putting stuff away because I'm like, okay, I don't. So that's great. Great conversation to have with yourself. Anybody else?
You see, y'all are already doing what you're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing.
Anyone else?
I also started putting money in my bank account versus having cash. I noticed that I spend, like if I see cash, I'm gonna see cash in my wallet. I'm more likely to spend the cash versus,
No, good. Yeah, perfect.
That's actually interesting because
Yeah.
a lot of people, they recommend the other piece because when you have a credit card, you're not really seeing how much money you're handing over versus if you have cash, you're like, oh, 5, 10, 15. Oh my gosh, it's more tangible that you're feeling it, right? So that's interesting that that's what works for you. And that's what today's session is about. It's not one size fits all, right? So take whatever is going to fit with your own money management style. Another one that I like using is challenging myself, creating little fun games, because then I feel like, okay, I accomplished something. Can I go a whole week without going out to eat? I'm like, okay, cool. And then can I go 2 weeks? Can I go 3 weeks, right? Or having a no spend weekend, things like that. So those are some of the tips and tricks that I like using, but we definitely love hearing from all of you.
Someone else mentioned, Patricia mentioned, always pay yourself first. It's a great strategy. And then credit cards. So stopping yourself from impulse buying with credit cards. Yes. So easy to do that. Yes. Okay. One thing that I do, that I try to do as much as I can, that I grew up with, was we weren't allowed to have fast food until like Friday night was our fast food, or eating out day. When my parents, that was just something, always a rule, and I thought it was so annoying, and now I'm like, I'm doing that with my kids. But again, just thinking about different ways, and like Christina mentioned, like you're probably doing some things already, so you're not that you don't feel like you're behind or like you're starting from scratch. Okay. All right. So this one right here is just some extra tips. So with our information that we shared today, and I know we have a couple of minutes, but with the information that we shared today, this is just a starting point, right? So we encourage you to continue having these conversations, but these are just some quick tips that we wanted to share in addition to what we've shared so far. Is just starting to create an emergency fund. Like Christina mentioned before, Murphy's Law, right? And we probably experienced this all in different ways. So having that cushion to help you in case if anything happens. Setting boundaries with yourself and your support system. Okay. Someone mentioned like going to the store and always buying toys for kids, right? That trying to practice and setting boundaries with that. But it could just be in general with family. Sometimes I have students that they give their whole paycheck to their family or half or whatever. And of course, that's definitely if necessary, if needed, but trying to figure out ways so that if you need to say no or create better kind of communication with them. And then always reevaluate your budget and make changes as needed. So this is a starting point. Don't get discouraged if it's at first it's not working. Be patient with yourself and always reevaluate what's going on and assess like, okay, what worked, what didn't work. So every month I encourage you, every couple weeks, if you start a budget, to think about those things. And then just make sure that you're informed and ask questions with anything that you get yourself into. So when it comes to, someone mentioned about, debt and, credit cards and things like that, because that's part of might be part of your experience. You want to make sure that whatever you sign up for, you know what you're signing up for. And so to make sure that you're careful and that you don't fall into those, predatory loans or overextend yourself with too many credit cards, things like that. But definitely do your research. So again, these are just some brief tips in addition to what we shared throughout the presentation. Another thing we wanted to share is the next slide is just some apps that that we've experienced or we've seen that are pretty popular among college students. So these are some budgeting apps that you can take a look at, and they're free. I'm going to put the links on the chat and also send them to you at the end. But if anyone can share of any apps that they might use. So if you put them on the chat, things that might have worked for you when it comes to budgeting or just money management. I know Christina mentioned like your banks might have, apps that you can monitor. But does anyone have any that they use aside from these? No? Okay, yeah. So you're definitely your bank. Check out. I didn't even realize that your bank might have a budget feature. So definitely you could start with that. But these are some other apps that you can start with.
Yeah, and online banking, for example, I have Bank of America. It does have that budget feature, and it's pretty cool because then I could set out goals like what financial goal I want to accomplish, and then it tracks and it'll tell me, yes, you're on track to meet your goal, or no, you're not on track. And I'm like, oh my gosh, The other app I love using is NerdWallet, just to stay informed. To be aware of what resources are out there, right? Especially as I'm getting older, I start realizing now that I have a daughter, like not only thinking short term, but also thinking long term, retirement, right? Thinking about investing, thinking about the different, like maybe like 2.0 budgeting, right? And that it's going to change based on your lived experiences, based on your goals. So hopefully as you start navigating your experience, you're at least able to walk away with one thing that you want to implement, or maybe one thing that you learned today and a tip that you could also share out with other people in your network as well.
The next slide is just some resources that we will send to you all via email after this presentation, in addition to the other resources that we shared. But we encourage you to continue to educate yourself. Use this time at Cal Poly to strategize, to learn definitely good money habits, so that once you graduate, once you go on to the next step, you're ready for that. A lot of students don't focus on this, and then they are challenged when they go into the professional world with money management. So again, take at least, hopefully we hope that you took one thing from this presentation, and we will be following up, and follow up with your advisors, any of the advisors from any of the programs that you're involved with, if you want a accountability partner, just to help with getting feedback in regards to budgeting. And we will also be sending a budgeting worksheet, a couple budgeting worksheets, some examples if you want to try those, if apps aren't really your thing. But again, thank you so much for joining us. It's already 12:50, so we will be here. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And just by you being here today, you're taking a step to a right direction, right? So it's always good to see you all at our different workshops, especially when it comes to financial wellness.
Yes, and just know that you're not alone, that we're all learning together. But thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully we can see you in our next presentation, which is all about credit. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great spring break. Bye. Oh, and you can do the survey on the chat. That'd be great.